Hello everyone, and welcome to the final full episode of Tim Rex Season 1. Don't worry, I'll be back in January, and there will be several short videos before then. I'll give my thoughts on the upcoming Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom trailer, Star Wars Episode 8, release highlights from this season, and give some ideas of what's to come in the new year. Now, with all that out of the way, in preparation for the upcoming Star Wars movie, which is the second in the sequel trilogy, let's talk about one of the best sequels ever made, and the best Star Wars movie ever made. Nope, not that. Huh, not even close. Okay, that's not even funny. There we go. The Empire Strikes Back. There is so much to this timeless classic to go on and on about. It's insane. It's insanely good. If The Last Jedi is only a fraction of what The Empire Strikes Back is, then it'll surely be a great movie. The sad part is that there's so much here to unpack, it's nearly impossible to mention everything. There are so many fantastic scenes that alone would be the highlight of any movie, so many quotable lines, tons of memorable sounds and music, gripping character moments. I can go on forever. Needless to say, this is gonna take a while. So, what makes this film so epic? Why do many hail it as the greatest Star Wars ever made? And why is it one of my favorite things? Let's take a look. One of the many reasons why Empire is praised as one of the greatest sequels of all time is because it takes what we all know and love and builds upon it tremendously. Star Wars from 1977 was a groundbreaking, fun, and exciting adventure that ends with a triumphant victory for the rebels as they blow up the Empire's infamous Death Star. The Empire Strikes Back is exactly how this entire sequel goes. It's not like any of the other Star Wars names that make little to no sense, like Revenge of the Sith. What does that even mean? What are they getting revenge for? The Empire certainly does strike back. A reason why the original Star Wars trilogy works so well as a trilogy is because each movie can be compared to its own act in a story's three-act structure. The first being the setup of the characters, the story, and the world. The second being the lowest point for the protagonists, where they grow as individuals in order to persevere, and the third being the finale, where the heroes are able to overcome the conflict, in this case being the fight against the Galactic Empire. Now, it may sound a little odd to just pluck out the middle of an overarching story and analyze it, but Empire is well able to stand on its own with little explanation. Most of what you need to know is presented in the opening crawl, and pretty much everything else is ingrained into our culture's memory. But anyways, throughout the entire movie, from the opening title to the final remorseful shot of the galaxy, the Rebel Alliance as well as our protagonists are on the run from this massive force hunting them down. The Empire wants revenge. They're desperate to wipe out this out-of-control rebellion that destroyed the Death Star. Our heroes get frozen, blown up, tortured, tested, and mutilated. The film opens with the rebels relocated on the ice bucket of Hoth after being kicked out of their cozy base on Yavin. Then they all get wasted again by the giant AT-ATs in the Battle of Hoth. So Empire takes all our favorite characters and puts each of them through a strainer. Everyone has to face new challenges and grow from them. Luke trains with the new character Master Yoda to become a Jedi, while his friends Han, Leia, Chewie, and the droids constantly flee from the hand of Darth Vader, who uses their misery to draw Luke out of hiding. I'll go into detail about each of the main characters and how they develop a bit later, but it is important to note that this is a coming-of-age story for our main protagonists, as they get dragged through the mud again and again. Luke tries to become a Jedi and improve his Force abilities, while Han and Leia grow closer as they escape the Empire. One of the reasons this story is so memorable is that each of the protagonists lose. Luke is defeated by Vader, Han Solo gets frozen in carbonite, and Lando loses his city to the Empire. Everyone gets pushed to their limits in order to grow and come back in the next sequel. It's so emotionally gripping. These two heroes who we've learned to love over the course of these two movies and who've become closer and more open with each other are suddenly split apart across the galaxy as one is sold to a Hutt. Man, I could just imagine what audiences must have been feeling in 1980. They come back to see the heroes from the historic Star Wars work together and overcome the evil Empire again, but nope, they get dismembered instead. Star Wars has become such a cornerstone of our culture that I don't even need to explain to you who everyone is, cause odds are you already know them. You'd have to travel thousands of miles to find someone who didn't know who this is. And remember, Yoda wasn't even in the original Star Wars. He shows up here and within 5 minutes proves himself to be the swellest green swamp monster until 2001. Since I'm already talking about him, let's get him out of the way. And yes, I'll only be talking about Yoda. Sadly, Yaddle doesn't make an appearance until The Phantom Menace. But Yoda is the ultimate mic dropper, constantly dropping these bombs of wisdom on Luke.
I don't believe it.
That is why you fail.
Probably my favorite piece of dialogue of his is when he describes the Force. It's such a moving speech and really builds upon what was already established in the first film. I know I've already played it in my second video ever, but I have to play it again.
I can't. It's too big.
Size matters not. Look at me. Judge me by my size, do you? And where you should not. For my ally is the Force, and a powerful ally it is. Life creates it, makes it grow. Its energy surrounds us and binds us. Luminous beings are we, not this crude matter. You must feel the Force around you. Here, between you, me, the tree, the rock, everywhere. Yes, even between the land and the ship.
He's a great contrast to Luke, who is still young, impatient, and inexperienced. Even though he's been able to force a lightsaber, we see how he's still far from the wise Jedi Knight that he strives to be. Yoda is wise and patient and understands the difference between using the Force for good and evil. He does his best to mentor Luke, but it could possibly be in vain if Luke gives in to Vader or just flat out dies. I also love Yoda's reveal, at first being a nagging pest to Luke, trying to test his patience and see what he's made of, but then revealing himself to actually be a Jedi Master once Luke loses it, trying to show to him that the Force isn't about the physical, but the mental. He's a tiny old Muppet, but he understands that it's not size, strength, or even skill that really makes a good Jedi. It's faith. Yoda looks at the sunken X-Wing and doesn't think about how much larger it is than him. He simply trusts in the Force and knows it to be movable. Inexperienced Luke, however, only sees the physical. He knows how to wield the Force, but he gets overwhelmed by the feeling that what he's attempting is impossible. Because Luke sees lifting a ship as impossible, it is. Because Yoda knows it to be possible, it is. And by the way, the X-Wing scene is probably the best scene in all of Star Wars. Just throwing that out there. One last thing on Yaddle, I mean Yoda, is the awesome puppetry used for him. He looks and moves better than anything you'd see on Sesame Street, and is able to give a lot of expressions, making him feel all the more real, and giving us this hilarious picture. As for Luke, I feel so bad for this guy. He trains to become a noble Jedi Knight, like his father, in order to take down Vader, but in the end learns that the great warrior he looks up to is actually the most evil guy in the galaxy. His whole life was a lie, or at least his life since the first film. I've gotta hand it to the writers though, they made the most famous twist of all time. Anyways, Darth Vader and Yoda are kind of at odds. Yoda wants Luke to continue his training on Dagobah, while Vader tries to lure him out by torturing his friends. As we all know, Vader wins. Luke is still reckless and too impatient to heed Yoda's warnings. You can't blame him too much though. His best friends could have been killed for all he knows. So in this coming of age story for Luke, he ultimately fails. He loses his hand, he loses his friend, and he loses his family pride. Darth Vader doesn't necessarily win either, but Luke definitely lost that exchange, hands down. Luke wasn't able to grow fast enough into a noble Jedi, and because of his lack of growth, paid the price. But my words can't fully capture what the movie itself shows. Just look at how the climactic battle begins. Look at how Luke eagerly jumps with his lightsaber, itching for a fight. He's overly anxious and again impatient. Vader, on the other hand, is calm and collected. And like I mentioned in all my Star Wars videos, look at how the fight expresses the characters. Look at how there's meaning within each swing. Do I have to bring up a fight from the prequels again? Then, of course, there's Han and Leia's story. In the beginning, there's a lot of tension between the two. Their relationship in the movie begins with Han leaving to pay off his debt with Jabba, who we have not seen yet, but gets upset with Leia for not showing that she cares when he knows that she does. The two, over time, as they run from the Empire, end up growing closer and being more open with each other, to the point towards the end where Leia confesses her love for him in one of the greatest scenes ever, with Harrison Ford delivering a brilliantly improvised scene.
I love you.
I know.
And also Chewie, even without speaking Galactic Basic, makes this scene so much more heartbreaking, with his emotional screams of horror as his best friend is being turned into a statue for a hut. Brilliant scene. But anyways, we the audience are able to fully get invested in Han and Leia's relationship because of course we want them to get together instead of, the alternative. Ugh. Lando is also pretty cool too. He's in charge of the Cloud City, a gas mining facility on the planet Bespin. He's caught in the middle of the conflict between the protagonists and the Empire. He wants to keep his base out of their hands, but the only way he sees how is by handing the heroes over to Vader. I like that we get to see someone who's neutral in the conflict, instead of just depicting all the good guys as rebels and all the bad guys as Imperials, like I mentioned before in my video about Rogue One versus The Force Awakens. Lando reluctantly is forced to turn over Han, but helps in the end after seeing him get frozen and his friends captured. He doesn't care about the rebellion until being pushed too far by the Empire. So there's a reason why so many people remember these iconic characters. They're so good. Darth Vader isn't the most recognizable character in all of cinema for nothing. He had a fantastic introduction in the original Star Wars, but it doesn't compare to his persistence and relentlessness in Empire. Vader's goal is to find Luke Skywalker and convert him to be an agent of the dark side, or flat out kill him if he refuses. But being force sensitive, he's too much of a risk to have around fighting for the rebellion, so Vader plans to encase him in carbonite and hand deliver him to the Emperor, an idea which he tests on Han to make sure Luke wouldn't die in the process. Even though Han and Leia are of high standing in the Rebel Alliance, Vader doesn't care at all about them. He just uses them and tortures them in order for Luke to feel their suffering through the Force and come to him, making his job easier. I think his plan is too complicated. If Vader wants to convert Luke to the dark side, all he has to do is say,
Do it. Join me, and I will complete your training. With our combined strength, we can end this destructive conflict and bring order to the galaxy. I'll never join you! Do it.
This guy is so ruthless in his pursuit of the rebels and Luke that he chokes to death anybody who fails him along the way without hesitation. The position of Imperial Admiral gets reopened like every hour. And we see Vader's very rushed thinking as he doesn't give a second thought to any decision if there is even a slight chance of killing the rebellion. Like in the very beginning when an Imperial drone detects a small base on Hoth, Vader, without confirmation, quickly jumps at the opportunity and goes with an army to this ice cube in the far reaches of space. And even when the Millennium Falcon is flying through an asteroid field, he orders TIE fighters to go after them. The death toll doesn't matter at all to Vader as long as he achieves his goals. I also like some of the changes given to him between movies. His costume is shinier and stands out with a more prominent chest piece. And you may not have realized it, but the Imperial March, one of the most popular pieces of music in cinema, was introduced in this movie. It wasn't actually in the original, and it really displays that sense of overwhelming power and conquest. The Imperial March is perfect for the Empire and Vader. Also, The Empire Strikes Back gives us a better look at who Darth Vader is. Okay, obviously he's Luke's father. I hope I'm not shocking anyone by saying that. But we briefly get to see the man beneath the mask in a brief shot. We see how broken and damaged he is underneath his mechanical and menacing exterior. Just like in Return of the Jedi, we see how Anakin's still a vulnerable, caring human underneath it all, which Luke takes advantage of in the end when he's able to convince him to kill the Emperor. Even here in Empire, we see that Vader somewhat cares about Luke, not just as a potential apprentice, but as a son. First, of course, offering to rule the galaxy together as father and son after overthrowing the Emperor, but in the very end, also gently calling to him through the Force. But on the other hand, Luke loses his other hand. Now, that's what I call abusive parenting. So overall, Darth Vader is the most memorable villain in film, not just because of his cool abilities, but his sheer ruthlessness in The Empire Strikes Back. And of course the biggest twist ever. We also get our first look at the famous Boba Fett here. Okay, no, that doesn't count. One of the major themes in The Empire Strikes Back is a struggle between good and evil. We see this with Luke. He's training in the Force, but his impulsiveness brings him to bad choices. When he asks Yoda whether the dark side is stronger, Yoda describes it as the quick and easy route, but not stronger. We see Luke struggle with this multiple times. When Yoda tells him to enter the cave without weapons, Luke still carries his lightsaber in with him. Luke's also told that he'll see in the cave what he brings in there. Because Luke brought his fear and impulsiveness, symbolized by bringing the lightsaber in the cave for protection, even after Yoda told him he wouldn't need it, what he finds is Darth Vader, someone who took the easy, tempting path of the dark side after being trained in the ways of the Force. And not only did he see Vader, but himself in the mask, showing how the dark side will consume him if he continues down this road. By the end, Luke's even more like Vader by getting a robotic hand. This all gets concluded in the next one, but it's important to look at here. And then there's also how Luke hurries to confront Vader when he was unprepared to save his friends. It's a fast solution, but doesn't end well. It would have been better if he took his time to train more on Dagobah before confronting Vader, as Yoda suggests. The quick and easy route may look more tempting, but ultimately leads to destruction. So we see the struggle of doing the right thing, the patient and selfless thing, over doing what's immediate and easy. The light versus the dark. Another important theme in Empire is faith. I've gone over a lot of it already with the X-Wing scene, so I'll keep it brief. Yoda proves to Luke that despite how monumental an obstacle may seem, no matter how great the challenge, everything is possible if you have faith. Luke was so focused on the size of his ship, on the size of the obstacle, to remember to trust in the Force. I remember in my film class days, we watched this movie because it's awesome, but after this scene, we paused it to go over what was happening for those poor souls who haven't watched a Star Wars movie before. And I commented here how this scene took a page straight out of the Bible in Matthew. Jesus called his disciple Peter to walk on water with him, but Peter lost his focus on Jesus and instead focused on the storm around him, causing him to fall. Just like the scene with the rocks and the scene with the X-Wing. I actually made a teacher proud of me for once and not think I'm a total failure. Now there are so many different places to focus in on with this movie. I can get into the grass being greener elsewhere for Luke in the beginning of his story, only to find that the galaxy's riddled with monsters and swamps. There's the importance of patience, temptation, which I've pretty much covered already. There are so many different directions you can take, and so many pieces you can focus on throughout Empire, but I'll just leave it there. I mean, I can go on and on about the characters and what's going on between the lines all day, but what's just as cool is some of the action. A lot of it I've already gotten into because it helps characterize, well, the characters, like how the AT-ATs blowing up the rebel base on Hoth shows us the might and size of the Empire over the Rebel Alliance, how the cave scene shows us that Luke is on the path to becoming Vader, how fleeing from the Empire in an asteroid belt draws Leia and Han closer, and how the climactic battle between Luke and Vader shows Luke's impulsiveness. I love it. I love that there's not just mindless action that only serves to give kids a laser light show. There's more to it than that. I also love how the final scene is staged. It's really intense. All the music dies down, so all you hear is Darth Vader breathing and his voice. You feel the intensity Luke must be facing, being alone with the deadliest man in the galaxy in a dark room. Darth Vader then proceeds to completely own Luke, but somewhat underestimates his abilities. So then the battle escalates to the point where Vader begins attacking him from the shadows and starts wailing on him. I love how cocky Vader is. Luke is rushing him, and he's just totally whooping him with one hand like he doesn't even care. You know what, I have to stop. I'm gonna go on forever with this scene at this point. Even though this is the darkest and most intense Star Wars film, it still remembers to be fun. Han, C-3PO, and Leia provide a lot of comedic levity and plenty of quotable lines. If you ever want to insult a Star Wars fan, just call them a scruffy-looking nerf herder. Also, when Vader is being a straight-up savage to Lando, and he complains about how their deal keeps getting worse, it's so funny, and it's always fun to watch another Admiral get choked to death. Vader literally chokes this guy through the screen. This guy is a legend. So The Empire Strikes Back doesn't divert too far from the fun and whimsicalness of the original. In fact, it improves upon it. It's still massively enjoyable to watch, even though many of your favorite characters are constantly suffering. Man, there are just so many amazing things in Empire that would be the highlight of any average movie, but since there's so many slices of greatness here in this one pie, it may be easy to overlook some things, like the locations. Every planet and area is so well realized and has its own feel, environment, and inhabitants. Hoth as the galaxy's largest refrigerator, perfect. It looks amazing, and you feel cold just watching it. And of course you've got the Tauntauns there, and the Wampa, which to my understanding wasn't shown in the original version. Dagobah also looks really convincing, as just a large swamp with snakes, lizards, and giant fish roaming around. And finally, of course, Bespin. The city in the clouds looks stunning. Everything from the architecture itself to the civilians adds tremendously to make the world feel more fleshed out. And each location is accompanied by a remarkable score. The Empire Strikes Back is certainly one of John Williams' best scored films, with one of the greatest soundtracks in movie history. So many of the pieces throughout are brilliant. The asteroid field, the Battle of Hoth, the Imperial March, Yoda and the Force in the X-Wing scene, Betrayal at Bespin, the Rebel Fleet, and of course the main title theme, to name a few. It's all terrifically composed. The camera work and the cinematography are also so excellent and add so much to the drama of the scenes, like the shot of Darth Vader silhouetted right before his confrontation with Luke. That, coupled with the unforgettable sound of his breathing, leaves a bone-chilling impression. There's also the AT-ATs on Hoth and how they're portrayed. They're similar to the Star Destroyer in the first movie because of how they're shot in a way that makes them dwarf the rebels fighting against them, signifying the might of the Empire. And of course, because this is Star Wars, there are plenty of awesome looks at outer space. Another great thing about The Empire Strikes Back is the set design. The carbonite freezing chamber in particular is so gorgeous to look at. The use of the complementary colored lights with the fog, it's awesome. It looks like a cloudy day at Citi Field. It also helps that it's at the dramatic high point for Han and Leia. Other sets like the Millennium Falcon interior and the Hoth Eco Base also look great and feel lively. So, in conclusion, yeah, this movie is awesome. It's not just the best Star Wars movie, or Star Wars anything for that matter, but also one of the best movies ever. One of the most revered artistic works of the 20th century that is still beloved to this day by people across the globe. You can't build that kind of popularity without being at least a good movie. Well, actually you can, but The Empire Strikes Back deserves this reputation. What's there not to love? It takes a bunch of characters we know and love and matures them, gets us a deeper look at the greatest villain in cinema, has an emotionally gripping story, has plenty of brilliantly handled themes, there's plenty of fun to be had in the comedy and action, gives us possibly the best soundtrack in all of film history, shows plenty of fleshed out environments, and everything comes together in one of the greatest finales ever, with a twist that even I'll admit gives BioShock a run for its money. Irvin Kershner directed a cinematic masterpiece that shall be remembered as long as Western civilization itself. So how on earth could The Empire Strikes Back not be one of my favorite things? Next week, I'll finally be giving my thoughts on Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi. I'm so excited. So be sure to leave a like and subscribe. See you next week.